Long before digital flashcards, spaced repetition, algorithms, or even the invention of paper, an ancient thinker crafted one of the most elegant and powerful systems of memory the world has ever seen. The system did not rely on writing or technology, but on space, stars, and the imagination. It was the Metrodorus method, a memory technique so profound it laid the intellectual foundation for modern cognitive science. Yet, it remains obscure to most of us. Now, our story begins with the protagonist of our story, Metrodorus of Scepsis. Now, he lived in the 1st century BCE in a small town located in Asia Minor. That's modern-day Turkey. Now, he was a philosopher, orator, and a student of Crates of Malice. Positioned intellectually among Stoics and rhetoricians, Metrodorus was both deeply analytical and wildly imaginative. But his most lasting legacy was not in ethics or logic. It was his transformation of an ancient memory technique known as the method of Loci, and he transformed it into something truly systematic and celestial. Now, the Renaissance scholar Frances A. Yates, in her seminal work, The Art of Memory, it's quite a good read, I do recommend it. She explored Metrodorus's contributions at some length. She draws attention to how his method may have been influenced by astrological frameworks. Now, as Yates recounts from an earlier study on ancient mnemonic systems, I quote, "I suspect that Metrodorus was versed in astrology, for astrologers divided the zodiac not only into 12 signals, but also into 36 decans, each covering 10 degrees. For each decan, there was an associated decan figure." Now, at the core of the Metrodorus method lies a celestial construct, often referred to as the memory palace of the zodiac. Now, he divided the 12 zodiac constellations into 30 segments, creating a grid of 360 loci, that being individual locations or stations where information could be encoded. Now, this mirrored the structure of the 360 degrees found within an elliptic, that is a complete circle, tying the structure of memory to the structure of the heavens. Now, each segment was visualized as a station within the sky. At each station, Metrodorus would place vivid symbolic imagery, whether it be mystical gods, mythology figures, surreal hybrids, or allegorical scenes. Now, these images were carefully crafted to reflect specific information, often using metaphor, absurdity, emotional resonance to render them unforgettable. Now, the system allowed Metrodorus, and likely his students, to store massive quantities of verbal and conceptual knowledge. A legal argument, an oration, or a philosophical tract could be mentally deposited along this zodiac road and then later retrieved in sequence via the transversal of the night sky, now an interior landscape. Now, to understand the practical brilliance of this method, consider the memorization of a 360-line poem. One would divide the poem into 12 thematic or structural sections, each corresponding to a zodiac sign. Within each sign's domain, 30 loci would be populated with mental images, each encoding a line or a concept. For instance, in Aries Locus 1, one might picture a ram reading a scroll set aflame symbolizing a verse about war and transformation. At Aries Locus 2, the ram might be riding a lion while playing a lyre, an image encoding pride, power, and poetic expression. Now, each image would be placed within a spatially coherent and symbolically rich framework, allowing for sequential recall without external prompts. Now, this was not brute memorization. It was spatial navigation through a mytho-symbolic map. Now, what made Metrodorus' method so revolutionary was not its scale, but its deep engagement with cognition. It combined spatial awareness, visual imagery, symbolic abstraction, and sequential logic into a single mental architecture. Now, long before cognitive science formalized these principles, Metrodorus was intuitively applying what we already know as dual coding theory, that is, encoding information both visually and verbally, as well as schema theory by creating a structured framework onto which we can embed information and then later recall. He also used chunking, that is, dividing content into smaller, digestible segments for easier retrieval. He also appreciated spaced encoding, that is, the dispersal of information across ordered locations to optimize retention over a longer period. So by aligning memory of the Zodiac, Metrodorus also introduced a calendrical and cosmological element, inviting users to think of memory not as mere storage, but as ritual, journey, and astral symmetry. Now, in modern times, the method of Loci, popularized again during the Renaissance and reaffirmed through neuroscientific research, has found a new renaissance. Memory competitors such as Joshua Foer use a simplified version of the system to memorize hundreds of names, digits, or even poems. In Moonwalking with Einstein, Foer reflected on his own journey into the world of memory palaces, where spatial imagery replaces passive reading as the gold standard for retention. Today, students, lawyers, actors, and even language learners use digital or imagined structures, campuses, buildings, game maps, or even social networks as memory palaces. The core remains unchanged. Encode meaning in a space, make it vivid, and walk the path of memory like a pilgrimage. Now, some may ask, why does memory matter in an age of infinite access to information? Because memory is not about retrieval, it's the architecture of thought. Every act of critical thinking, every creative insight, every problem solved relies on the interconnected web of ideas held within working memory, and long-term recall is the gateway to unlocking that information. Now, the Metrodorus method is more than a party trick. It's a philosophical stance on how knowledge is best arranged, not flat on a screen, but spatial, symbolic, and alive. It teaches us to engage with ideas, to navigate knowledge, and to construct memory as a form of art. Now, Metrodorus of Scepsis may have died over 2,000 years ago, but his palace still floats in the heavens, waiting for minds bold enough to step inside. His system, as Francis Yates reminds us, was more than mnemonic mechanisms. It was a cosmic and symbolic framework for structured understanding. In today's age of distraction, the Metrodorus method offers an ancient solution. Slow down, encode deeply, and build your thoughts into architecture. Whether you're a student, philosopher, artist, or simply a curious mind, the invitation remains. Don't just memorize, design. Don't just recall, wonder. Don't just learn, imagine.